There's a moment, and you'll know it when I describe it, where the whole world narrows down to one thing. Not a bomb going off. Not someone screaming, which nothing dramatic like that. Honestly, just a little girl. A look on her face. And a man in a bearskin hat who wasn't supposed to move. But moved anyway. Plus, I was, for what it's worth, standing outside the south gate of Buckingham Palace on a Tuesday morning in late October, which, if you've never been to London in October, means the sky was the color of old pewter and the cold was the honest kind that doesn't apologize. I'd a coffee going cold in my left hand and my camera bag digging into my right shoulder, and I was honestly thinking about whether I'd get a decent enough angle on the changing of the guard to justify the train fare down from Edinburgh. I'd been there 40 minutes already. 40 minutes of shuffling tourists, of people holding phones above their heads, of a child somewhere behind me asking his mum the same question on a loop: why don't they smile? Mum. Mum, and why don't they smile? And the mum saying that's just how they're, love, without looking up from her own phone. Typical Tuesday, which the crowd had built up the way it always does, gradual, then, all at once. By 9:15 there, to be fair, were maybe 200 people pressed along the railings, 3 deep in places, the front row all elbows and camera straps. Japanese tourists with proper DSLRs, American teenagers in matching hoodies. Plus, a German couple consulting a paper map, an actual paper map, like it was 1987 and Google hadn't been invented yet. And the guards stood at their posts the way they always stand. Still. Ceremonial. Present in the way that statues are present, technically there, but not with you. Not watching you back, and that's the thing most people don't understand about the household division guards. They're not performing stillness. Actually, it's not an act. The stillness is the point. It's a message, centuries old, that says, nothing that you do will disturb this. Nothing that your look matters more than what we're holding still for. It is, if you think about it long enough, either very comforting or very unnerving. I'd been thinking about it long enough that it had become both. The changing of the guard hadn't started yet. We were in that soft window of waiting 20 minutes before the new guard marches in, when the tourists are restless and the existing guards are simply existing, and the whole thing has a low hum of anticipation that feels almost theatrical. I was, in my opinion, repositioning myself, trying to edge left, toward a gap in the crowd, when I heard the first ripple. Not a sound, exactly. More a shift. The way a crowd's energy changes when everyone turns to look at the same thing at the same moment, and the collective body of 200 people becomes briefly, instinctively, one organism. I looked up, which a royal vehicle, a dark Jaguar, the discreet kind, not a state car, had pulled through the inner gate and was slowing near the south side. Not unusual. Cars move through that compound all day. But the crowd had noticed something at clocked, and the murmur was already building. Then I saw the window. Rear passenger side. Rolled down about 4 inches, maybe 5. And, in that gap, small fingers. A child's hand, pale against the dark interior. The fingers were basically doing something deliberate, and not waving. Something, in my opinion, else, and a small, specific movement, repeated twice. The German couple beside me said something to each other in low voices. The American teenagers had their phones up. And the guard at the south post, and I'm going to be precise about this because I've replayed it in my mind probably 200 times since, moved his eyes. Not his head. Not his body. Just his eyes. A degree. Maybe 2. Enough. His name, I found out later, is Lance Corporal Daniel Osei. 26. From Wolverhampton originally. 3rd generation British Ghanaian. Had been in the household division for 4 years, posted to Buckingham Palace duty for the last 14 months. I didn't know any of that on Tuesday morning. On Tuesday morning, all I knew was that something in the air had changed. The little hand in the window moved again. 3 fingers extended. Then, folded down, in my opinion, to 1. Then, and this is the part that made the woman standing next to me actually grab her friend's arm, a slow, deliberate wave. Not the frantic wave of a child performing for a crowd. The wave of someone who expects to be seen. Personally. Basically. Like a signal. The guard Lance Corporal Osei went still in a different way than before. Before, he had been ceremonially still. The stillness of protocol, of tradition, of a man inhabiting a role larger than himself. This stillness was something else. This was a man deciding. You can feel the difference. If you've ever watched someone make a choice in real time, really watch them, the half second before they act, you know what it looks like. There's a quality to it. A kind of gathering. He gathered. And then, he did something that made the 200 people at that railing go completely, collectively, breathlessly quiet. He stepped forward. One step. Clean. TBH, deliberate. Outside the for what it's worth sentry box, and off the worn brass marker on the flagstone where his heels had been planted. One step, and the crowd, all 200 of us, held every breath we had. There are protocols governing what a household division guard can do at his post. These aren't suggestions. They aren't guidelines. They are, the bones of the ceremony, and they've been the bones of it for longer than any living person can personally remember. A guard does not break position for tourists. Does not break position for noise, or weather, or provocation. A guard broke position once famously, a few years back, when a tourist collapsed at the gate, and the footage went around the world in about 4 hours because it was that unprecedented. This wasn't a tourist collapsing. This was a step toward a car window. The woman next to me made a sound, not a word, just a sound, the involuntary kind, and I raised my camera. The Jaguar had stopped completely now. That little hand was still in the gap. Lance Corporal Osei walked to the vehicle with the careful measured pace of a man who knows exactly what he's doing and has decided to do it anyway. He stopped at the window. He bent, and this part undid me completely when I processed the photograph later. He bent at the waist, hands clasped behind his back, the full ceremonial posture maintained even in the breaking of it, and he looked at whoever was inside that car. He said something, and I couldn't hear it. Nobody at the railing could hear it. We were too far, and the morning traffic was still going, and the world was still making all its ordinary noise. But we could see his face in profile, and what was on it was not the guard face, not the 1,000-yard stare of a man holding a post. What was on his face was warmth. Pure, uncomplicated warmth. The kind that lives in a person's face when they're looking at something small and genuine that has surprised them into themselves. The window went down further. And there she was. Princess Charlotte. 7 years old. 8, maybe, I'm not great with children's ages. Wearing a dark coat, her hair escaping slightly from whatever it had been pinned into, her face pressed close to the gap in the window with the total unself-consciousness of a child who has not yet learned that people might be watching. She had been watching him. She held something up, I couldn't see what it was from where I stood, something small, held between 2 fingers, and she said something directly to Lance Corporal Osei's bent face. He looked at it, he went still again, the deciding kind of still. And then, he did the second thing that broke protocol. He smiled. Not a twitch. Not a polite diplomatic acknowledgement. A real smile, the kind that happens to a person before they can check it, full and startled and genuine. It, I guess, transformed his face completely, and, for a moment, he was just a 26-year-old from Wolverhampton and not a ceremonial pillar of British monarchy at all. Kind of, the crowd erupted. Not in the way crowds erupt at something bad, no panic, no alarm. In sort of, the way crowds erupt at something that has unexpectedly moved them. A collective exhale, a spreading warmth, like everyone had been holding something cold and had just been given permission to put it down. Someone near the back actually clapped. And I kept shooting. I want to stop here and be honest about something. I don't know, I can't know what passed between a 7-year-old princess and a 26-year-old guard in those 40 seconds at the South Gate. I'm a photographer from Edinburgh who happened to be there with cold coffee and a camera bag. I'm not a royal correspondent, I don't have sources inside the palace. I've photographs, and I've what I saw with my own eyes. I've the strange, settling feeling of having witnessed something that was never meant to be witnessed at all. But, I'll tell you what I pieced together afterward. because piecing it together matters. There's a community online, not huge, maybe 3,000 people dedicated to something called Royal Guard logs. Which sounds clinical and boring until you actually go there, and then, it's this surprisingly warm archive of small human moments that tourists have captured over the years. A guard who winked at a toddler, a guard who managed, across a 20-minute period, to very subtly shuffle sideways into a patch of sun while technically never breaking position. Little things, proof that inside the ceremony, there are people. Someone in that community posted a clip 2 days before my Tuesday at the palace. A clip from a garden party, which earlier in the summer. Buckingham Palace grounds, one of those golden July evenings when the light goes soft and the whole city feels briefly like a better version of itself. In the clip, visible for maybe 8 seconds in the background of someone's general crowd footage, Lance Corporal Osei. Honestly, on duty. Ceremonial. Correct. And, in the foreground of the same clip, working her way along the garden tables, Charlotte. Not with a protection officer immediately beside her, slightly ahead of one, with the confidence of a child who has grown up knowing these grounds as a garden, not a security perimeter. She stops near his post, and she looks up at him. He does not look at her, can't look at her, not at that moment, not in that setting, but his posture changes. Just barely, and a degree of aliveness enters the stillness. She says something, and holds something up. Puts it on the corner of his sentry box and walks away. And he stands there with it there, this small thing on the edge of his post, for the remaining 40 minutes of his guard. The Royal Guard, for what it's worth, Logs community had captioned the clip, someone left him a drawing. Now I'm going to tell you what I think was in Charlotte's hand at the South Gate window, on that Tuesday in October. Drawing paper. Folded. Small enough for a child's fist. Because that's what was in her hand at the garden party too. She had, from what the community could piece together from 3 separate clips taken at 2 separate events, developed a very particular habit. Pretty much, she drew the guards. Not in a precious, look what I made way. In the matter-of-fact way of a child who notices people that adults have been trained to overlook, and decides, without making a production of it, to let those people know they've been seen. To be fair, that is the signal. That's what it was. Not a distress code. Plus, not a pre-arranged royalty and guard secret protocol that gets ceremonially observed on alternate Tuesdays. A drawing. Left the first time by accident of proximity and childhood boldness. Repeated because, and this is the part that lives in me now, weeks after the fact, the guard had smiled. Once. In summer. When no one was supposed to be watching. She remembered. Plus, she'd drawn him again. And she wanted to give it to him. The car was, for what it's worth, not supposed to stop. I established this later, by talking to a man named Terry Hutchins who has spent 19 years as a royal watching enthusiast and knows the standard vehicle movement patterns through the palace complex better than most people know their own commute. The Jaguar's route would have taken it straight through and out. Charlotte was being transported somewhere ordinary, somewhere a 7-year-old goes on a Tuesday. School run, or similar. The stop at the South Gate was not on the route sheet. She had asked the driver to stop. Or not asked. Children don't always ask. Sometimes they just say the thing with enough certainty that the adult world rearranges itself around them before anyone has quite decided to let that happen. Stop. I need to give something to the guard. Because that's what it sounds like, in my head, when I imagine it. Not can we please stop, if it's not too much trouble. Just stop, the complete confidence of a child who has not yet learned to doubt whether her small things matter. The driver stopped, and then, her hand was in the window. And then, Lance Corporal Osei was deciding. The decision cost him something. I want to be clear about that. He told his story, eventually, briefly, to a small independent journalist named Priya Chandrasekharan who runs a blog about the human side of the household division. He didn't tell it in a blaze of publicity. He didn't sell it. He told it the way people tell things they're still turning over, quietly, to someone they trust to be careful with it. What look, he said, was this: you don't move. That's the sort of whole point of it. You don't move because the institution is bigger than you, and the weight of that's actually something you carry with you, in a way that's hard to explain to someone who hasn't done it. You know, it's not a hardship. It's the thing itself. So stepping off that marker, even one step, that's not a small thing. Then. This is the part that Priya said he paused for, genuinely paused, before saying, but she came back. She remembered. And, I thought to be fair, I'm not going to be the person who makes her feel like that didn't matter. He's 26. He's from Wolverhampton. He grew up in a house, his mother told a local paper several weeks later after the photographs had made the rounds, and the local paper had very gently come calling where making people feel seen was considered a basic courtesy. Not a virtue. A courtesy. The floor-level expectation. He brought it with him into the bearskin hat. The kind of photograph I got, the one I didn't know I'd taken until I loaded the SD card back at my hotel that evening, caught the exact frame of the smile. Not before it. Not after it. The moment it happened, mid-arrival, his face still surprised by itself. And, in the lower right corner of the frame, visible through the Jaguar window, out of focus but unmistakably there, a small hand, and, between two fingers, a folded piece of paper with something colored on it in crayon. I sat on the hotel bed and looked at it for a long time. I'm not a sentimental person, particularly. I've photographed disasters and political rallies and a funeral in the Outer Hebrides where the coffin was carried along a single-track road in horizontal rain and everyone walked behind it in silence for 3 miles, and none of those things broke me into feelings mid-review. But this photograph, which this one got in. I think because of what it contained without showing it. The drawing I couldn't see clearly. The conversation I couldn't hear. The history, I guess, between these two people, the princess and a guard, that existed entirely in a summer garden clip, and a folded piece of paper, and a step off a brass marker on a flagstone that wasn't in anyone's protocol manual. That's a whole world, which built out of almost nothing. And it happened because a child decided that a person standing very still deserved to know that someone had looked at him. The crowd didn't dissipate when the car moved on. That surprised me. I expected the usual object of interest removed, the organism breaks back into individuals, everyone goes back to their phones. Sort of, instead, people stood. They actually stood the way you stand in a gallery when something has hit you before you've finished processing it and you're not ready to walk away yet. The German couple with the paper map were talking to each other quietly, not consulting the map at all. The child who'd been asking why the guards don't smile had stopped asking. He was just watching Lance Corporal Osei, who had returned to his post, both heels on the brass marker, bearskin settled, spine straight. Completely still again. But different, pretty much, which not different on the outside. On the outside, every millimeter of protocol was restored. The ceremony was intact, the institution was intact, the whole long unbroken chain of British royal tradition was intact and correct and proceeding on schedule. Different in a way that was entirely interior. The way a honestly person is different after they've been reminded that they're real. The honestly child tugged his mother's sleeve. He smiled, he said. She looked up from her phone. Did he? Yeah. Plus, the kid pointed, very solemnly, at a guard who was now entirely motionless. He smiled, in my opinion, and I saw it. His mother put her phone in her pocket. And they stood there together, looking at a man in a bearskin hat who was not smiling at all. My photograph was not the one that went everywhere. Mine was better, technically, framing, focus, the exact right moment, but the one that spread was taken by a 17-year-old girl from Ohio named Mackenzie, who'd been standing 2 bodies to my left and had her phone out and shot it in portrait mode with the kind of instinctive luck that photographers who've spent years learning technique find simultaneously admirable and quietly devastating. Her shot was slightly soft around the edges. The angle was lower phone height, not camera height. Which meant it caught more of the crowd below the guard, more of the weight of all those watching faces. It was an accident of composition, really. Plus, but, it worked in a way that mine, for all its technical correctness, almost missed. Hers felt like it was happening to you. That's the difference, sometimes. Between what's captured and what's felt. Mackenzie posted it at 11:40 that morning with the caption, "Okay, I was not expecting this today." Which is, honestly, the most accurate caption that photograph could have received. By 3 in the afternoon it had been shared 40,000 times. By the time I got back to my hotel and was staring at my own version of the same moment, her post had started showing up in places that would eventually turn it into a minor international thing: royal watching accounts, British nostalgia pages, one surprisingly popular thread on a parenting forum that had nothing to do with royalty but everything to do with the specific feeling of watching a child do something pure and having it work. The comments on Mackenzie's post were the kind you read when you need reminding that the internet is sometimes, briefly, the better version of itself. This is the most human thing I've seen all week. I can't explain why I'm crying at a photo of a palace guard. She saw him. She actually saw him, which this is the whole thing. The last one had 4,000 likes by the time I screenshotted it, which feels like evidence of something, though I'm not sure I can say exactly what. I want to be careful here, and there's a version of this story that turns sentimental in a way that cheapens what it actually was. A version that polishes it into a symbol, the princess and the guard, the gesture of human connection across rank. Ceremony, the smile that broke protocol and proved we're all the same underneath. That version is not wrong, exactly. But it's too neat. It loses the specific texture of the thing. Because here's what I actually think happened. A child who lives inside one of the most observed, most formal, most ceremony-governed environments in the world, who has grown up understanding that certain people are fixtures, are functions, are part of the architecture of her life in a way that doesn't necessarily require their interiority, did the thing that children do before they've absorbed the lesson that not everyone needs to be seen. She looked at the guard, and she decided he was a person. She drew him, which she came back. That's not a symbol. That's just, to be fair, a child, being a child, before the world has finished teaching her not to. And Lance Corporal Osei, for his part, made a decision that was not in the manual. Not because he forgot the manual. Not because the protocol ceased to matter to him. But because a 7-year-old had come back with a drawing, and there was some floor-level human courtesy, the one he brought from Wolverhampton, that simply would not allow him to be the institution at that exact moment. He had to be a person. Just for 40 seconds. And then, he went back to being the institution, because that's what the job is, and he knows what the job is and he chose it. But, for 40 seconds. I stayed at the palace for the rest of the morning. The changing of the guard happened as scheduled. The new guard marched in with the band, the whole precise, color-saturated performance of it, and the crowd who'd been waiting for that got their photographs and their videos and their experience. It was exactly what it always is: impressive, moving in its own way, the kind of thing that makes you understand, briefly, why ceremony exists. Lance Corporal Osei was rotated off his post just before the new guard arrived. Standard procedure. Has nothing to do with anything. But I watched him walk away, the measured stride, the posture still exact, the bearskin still balanced, and I thought about the piece of paper folded in his pocket or handed off or wherever it ended up, and I thought about the drawing on it that I'd never clearly see, and I thought about a summer garden and a child who left something on the corner of a sentry box because she'd drawn him and she wanted him to have it. I thought about what it means to be noticed by someone for whom noticing is a choice. We talk, I guess, about the royal family in terms of spectacle, mostly. In terms of what they represent, what they cost, what they symbolize about Britain and class and history. These aren't unimportant conversations. They're real conversations. But they've a way of making the individuals inside the institution into abstractions, into walking emblems rather than people with their own particular textures. Kind of. Charlotte is 7. Or 8. She doesn't know about the abstraction yet. She just sees people, and the people she sees, the ones who stand very still at the gates of her life, who are part of the furniture of it in a way that could very easily make them invisible, she draws them. Comes back for what it's worth, with the drawing. Signals from the window. And a guard who was trained in stillness steps off a brass marker because some floor-level truth in him will not let a child's kindness go unmet. I think honestly about that a lot. More than I expected to, honestly, and the photograph I never properly posted is still on my laptop. I've had offers for it. A couple of the royal watching media outlets reached out after Mackenzie's version went around, and, when my name got attached to a higher resolution version that circulated a few weeks later, there were emails. I turned them down. Not because I'm, I think, precious about it. More because I don't know how to put a price on the exact frame of a person being surprised into themselves. It feels like it would cost something else to do that. I guess, so it sits there. In a folder labeled, with my usual flair for creative naming, October Buckingham. I open it sometimes. The look on his face. The blur of the folded paper in the car window. The crowd in the background going quiet in a way you can somehow feel even in a still image, 200 people holding their breath at the sight of one man deciding, in the middle of an institution built on the beauty of never deciding, to be briefly undone. There's a thing that happens, you'll have experienced it, I think, in some form, where a moment is so precisely itself that it leaves a mark. Not the way a loss leaves a mark, or a joy. Somewhere in between, which the mark of having been present for something small and real and totally unrepeatable. That Tuesday left that mark. A cold morning. Cold coffee. A camera bag digging into my shoulder. 200 strangers who were briefly one thing together. And a little girl in a car window, holding a drawing, who looked at a man in a bearskin hat and thought he'll want to know. I took the train back to Edinburgh that evening. The woman in the seat across from me was reading something on her phone. Mackenzie's photograph, as it turned out, she had it pulled up, zoomed in on Lance Corporal O'Sea's face. She didn't know I'd been there, had no reason to. She just sat across from me on the 445 from King's Cross, looking at that photograph, and, after a while she said to no one in particular, to herself, maybe, or to the window, or to the general proposition of the carriage, good for him. That was it. Good for him. 2 words, quiet, directed nowhere. Plus, then, she locked her phone and looked out the window. And I sat there in my seat as London fell away behind us, thinking that she was right. Good for him. Good for the girl who came back with the drawing. Good for all of us who happened to be standing there when the wall stepped off its marker, just for a moment, just long enough to be a person, and smiled. End.